Chair Dickey, we're ready whenever you are.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. We'll land acknowledgement to start this meeting off. I'd like to start this meeting by recognizing the homeland of the 30 First Nation communities of this area we now call the Fraser Valley Regional District, where we live, work, and learn. Important decisions that we make at a local government level can affect First Nations communities and Indigenous peoples and organizations in many different ways, both today and in the future. So as part of our collective responsibility, I commit that we continually examine the work we do to ensure that our project plans, initiatives, and discussion are guided by the principles of inclusion, collaboration, and reconciliation. So with that in mind, I'd like to call to order the March 9th, 2023 meeting of the Electoral Area Services Committee. And I will turn things to our CAO.
Thank you, Chair Dickey. So the first item on our agenda is your report on the Regional and Corporate Services Committee meeting this morning.
Good. It was a fairly short meeting. Not a lot of issues that came up. Mr. Urban gave us a report on the Cedar Network, which we're going to get in this meeting also, I believe. Yeah, and wealth and knowledge surrounding the First Nations peoples was included in the report. It was very well received and looks like a great information resource and an educational tool for all of us. Following that, there was a staff report on public feedback on the financial plan, which resulted in very little discussion and seemed to have been very well received in our communities. And that was pretty much the crux of the RACS meeting this morning.
So the next item, Chair Dickey, would be approval of the agenda, addenda, and late items.
Motion, Director Wardenberg, second Director Johnson. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
Item 5.1 is floodplain management bylaw update. It's a staff presentation by Caitlin Hipwell.
Welcome, Ms. Hipwell.
Good afternoon. My name is Caitlin Hipwell. I'm a planner with Electoral Area Planning, and today I'm here to provide an update to the committee on the ongoing floodplain management bylaw update. So for some of you, you may remember that back in September, staff brought a report to the committee, a for information report outlining the project of updating the floodplain management bylaw. Of course, there are new electoral area directors since that time. So for your benefit and the benefit of the whole committee, I'll provide a bit of an overview of the project today, a bit of history on floodplain management in the FVRD. We'll talk about the role of the floodplain bylaw. I'll summarize the provincial update from 2014, which is the impetus for the update to our own floodplain bylaw. And then we'll go over a few specific exemptions, and that's where I would really like to focus today's discussion if possible, on a couple exemptions where it would be nice to have the committee's feedback. So no decisions to be rendered today. We're not looking for a resolution from the committee, just wanting to kind of gather some of the feedback that comes. So the role of a floodplain management bylaw is to identify floodplains and areas that are at risk of flooding, and to establish flood construction levels or minimum elevations at which construction can occur, as well as setbacks from watercourses. Floodplain management bylaws are developed based on provincial guidelines that have been established by the province. So floodplain management in the FVRD. The first floodplain management bylaw was adopted in 1996, and this was a direct response to changes that occurred in the Municipal Act. So at that time, we saw a shift of responsibility and management of floodplains with the province being delegated over to municipalities. So in response to this change, the FVRD adopted their first floodplain management bylaw. This bylaw addressed gaps in knowledge where previously the FVRD had relied on ministry staff to help establish flood construction levels, setbacks from watercourses, as well as exemptions. Then in early 2000s, we saw the province come with more changes, more updates. The province published what's called the Provincial Flood Hazard Management Guideline. This is a guideline document that has been established in order to create consistency amongst the various bylaws of every municipality. So the guideline outlines guidelines for exemptions, what exemptions could apply, how a bylaw should be formatted, what content it should contain, and terminology. So in response to this guideline being published, again, the FBRD came and updated our existing floodplain management bylaw to the bylaw that we use today, bylaw 681. Shortly after that bylaw was adopted, we saw more changes coming from the province. These changes were twofold: an update to those guidelines that we use to kind of frame out our own bylaw, and then an update to some of the data that we use to derive flood construction levels for specific water courses in the regional district. And so those changes, which occurred back in 2014, are the impetus for today's update to the bylaw. So to briefly summarize the content of this update that has come from the province, I've kind of categorized it here into two components. So the first component being the technical data. So this is the data, the hydraulic modeling that has been used to establish a new design flood level for the lower Fraser area. So this is the section of the Fraser River that runs from Hope down to Mission. So through this new design flood profile, we can extract flood construction levels, new updated flood construction levels, and incorporate them into our own floodplain bylaw. This would be the component of the update that I would consider non-discretionary. So this data is established by qualified professionals using sophisticated modeling technologies and expertise that is not available at a local level and municipal level. And it is provided by the province to municipalities in order to incorporate into their own bylaws. So that's the first component of the update. Through this component, we are seeing an increase to the flood construction levels in this lower Fraser Reach of approximately, or an average of 0.8 meters. So on one side, we're seeing an increase of flood construction levels. The other component of the provincial update is the provincial guidelines. So these have been updated again, and in some cases, the exemptions that are available have been expanded. So these two components together are what formulate the update that we're undertaking now. So we have this increase to FCLs, which essentially will continue to further restrict development in flood-prone areas. And to balance that, we're seeing an expansion of the available exemptions to provide folks more options for developing their properties within these flood-prone areas. So I pulled out a couple of these expanded exemptions that I'd like to highlight today. The first one being the exemption for minor buildings. So our current bylaw allows minor buildings to be constructed exempt from meeting the established flood construction level if these minor buildings are less than 10 square meters. What we will see in our new bylaw is this limit of 10 square meters expanded to include minor buildings up to 20 square meters. This creates more flexibility for property owners. So you can imagine a person comes in to the planning department and they want to build a shed on their property. They're going to store wood, tools, what have you. In order for that person to meet the flood construction level, and oftentimes it will require a significant amount of fill. And when we're talking about minor buildings that are typically lower in value and have a lot less risk to property and life because they are not inhabited, we have these exemptions in order to exempt the person from meeting that flood construction level and allowing the construction of that building at the existing grade. So that is the first exemption that we'll see expanded upon in the new bylaw. The second expansion to an exemption is an exemption for additions to existing dwellings. And here we'll see an increase in allowable floor area for the additions. So our current bylaw allows additions to dwellings that were constructed prior to a specific date in 1981. These additions can be up to 25% of the existing floor area of the structure. So what we've found over the years in applying this exemption in our electoral areas is that it tends to be very restrictive for small dwellings and more permissive for larger dwellings, given the fact that it's a percentage of the existing floor area. In order to create more equity for folks coming in looking to apply this exemption, staff are moving to, rather than the percentage of allowable floor area for the addition, a static value. And we've established 50 square meters as this value. Where did we come up with 50 square meters? Staff see this as a reasonable amount of floor area to accommodate a couple of small bedrooms, as well as a modest increase to livable area. So this would allow for an addition to a dwelling that's more consistent with the type of construction that we're seeing today in terms of houses. So the 2.5 meter exemption is the last exemption I want to talk to you about today. And maybe I'll start by providing a little bit of background and context to this particular exemption. So the area of application for this exemption is limited to lands that are protected by the Dooney Dike and the Nikomin Island Dike. So we're talking about lands within Area F and Area G of the regional district. So the provincial guidelines provide a framework where the construction of a new dwelling could be exempt from meeting that established flood construction level where two specific conditions are met. The first condition is that the difference between the existing grade and the flood construction level exceeds 2.5 meters. So essentially where the ground is and where the ground ought to be is over 2.5 meters. There's a really significant difference there. The second condition is that the lands are protected by a standard dike. So in 2005, with the adoption of our existing floodplain bylaw, the regional board accepted a certain level of risk and liability by establishing this 2.5 meter exemption, which is consistent with provincial guidelines for lands protected by the standard Dooney Dike, but also applied this exemption to lands that are protected by the non-standard Nikomin Island Dike, and that is the key distinction. So thereby the board accepted an exemption that was essentially inconsistent with the provincial guidelines. The board of the day felt justified in doing so, given the context of the area. So we see existing ground elevations in this area that are significantly lower than the established flood construction level, sometimes in excess of 3 to 4 meters. So the balance with this exemption was to offer a certain level of flood protection while also allowing, or I should say, not completely frustrating development of homes on these lands. And that was the approach the board of the day took. So how do we address this particular exemption moving forward in the context of rising flood construction levels? So what's depicted on the screen here, the left elevation is an illustration of the old FCL from the 2005 bylaw, and that 2.5 meter exemption being applied in that circumstance. And the key part here to note is that black hatched area below the magenta dashed line. And what that hatched area represents is the amount of floor space, of habitable floor space that is vulnerable to flooding in a design flood or a 1 in 200 year flood. We understand and accept that there is a level of risk when implementing this particular exemption, and that is the risk that was accepted at the time. In moving forward, in light of new and higher flood construction level, staff have proposed one option whereby we could retain the existing exemption, but increase that elevation requirement from 2.5 meters above the existing grade to 3.3 meters above the existing grade. And that 0.8 meter increase is representative of that average increase in the SCL overall, if you follow. I know it's a lot of technical jargon here, so trying to simplify it for you. Let me know if there's any questions. I'm happy to take them. The justification in this one particular—
just to jump in.
Yeah, absolutely, Director Davidson, through the chair.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. Just for clarity, I noticed that the labels on the left-hand diagram for first floor and second floor, are they sitting one floor too high if I compare them to the diagram on the right?
Yes, they absolutely are. Thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you. That was it.
No worries. So by increasing the elevation requirement for the exemption to 3.3, essentially what we do is we maintain the same level of resiliency that was established with the 2005 bylaw, meaning that area of habitable floor space that is vulnerable to flooding stays the same. It doesn't get higher. And that's the intention with this particular approach to this exemption. Now, that's one approach, and there are many. So I've listed a couple of, the more obvious ones here, but this is certainly not an exhaustive list of potential paths for addressing this exemption. It might be helpful to consider these options as being on a spectrum of the level of flood protection that they offer, and also the level of liability that the FVRD accepts. So the first option, of course, being that we retain the existing exemption from the old bylaw and we translate it into our new bylaw without any changes. So retaining that 2.5 meter elevation requirement above the grade. This particular model would not account for those increases that we're seeing in the FCLs. The second option, which I've highlighted and red here, is the option that was illustrated on the previous slide. So we're keeping the exemption, we're moving it into the new bylaw, but in order to represent that increase in FCL, we are also increasing the elevation requirement from 2.5 meters to 3.3 meters. The third option, or an additional option, is that we bring this exemption consistent with the provincial guidelines, which would mean retaining that 2.5 meter elevation requirement for lands protected by the Dewdney Dike only, and removing an FCL exemption for lands protected by the Nikoman Island Dike, given that it is a non-standard dike. So certainly that option would increase the level of flood protection for lands behind the Nikoman Island Dike, because we would no longer see dwellings constructed below the established FCL. But an important consideration is that given the context of the area, the existing grades and the difference between that and the new FCLs, never mind the FCLs from 2005, that difference is so significant that this would present an incredibly restrictive option. So certainly increased level of flood protection, but really restricting the opportunity for people to build homes on their properties. So maybe I'll just kind of leave it on this slide. This is where I'd really like to kind of garner the feedback from the committee, hear the discussion, what your thoughts are in terms of how we could address this particular exemption moving forward in the new bylaw. Certainly not looking for the committee to render a decision one way or the other today, but I'm just here to sort of get that feedback, and then staff will take that back and come back to you with a draft bylaw in the coming months.
Good. Thank you, Ms. Hipwell, for a very nice presentation. A lot of different factors feeding into this decision, but I will turn things especially to
Dr. Davidson first.
Director Davidson and Director Castle are most involved in this. So Director Davidson, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So just for context, I did get sort of a preview of this presentation yesterday and a chance to ask some questions. So just for the benefit of the other committee members, one of the things that jumped out at me was for Dewdney was that the 2.5 meter exemption that's in there today does indeed is consistent with provincial guidelines, because the Dewdney dike is a standard dike. So I'd be looking for an option again that basically leaves Dewdney at 2.5 meters, because it is consistent with provincial guidelines, and the rationale today for increasing that to 3.3, it may come with new provincial guidelines, but it's not there right now. So I wasn't seeing a reason for exceeding the provincial guidelines as it relates to Dewdney. Nikoman is a different matter. So I just wanted to share that with the other committee members. The other thing out there, when I'm just looking at the
Dr.
existing
Davidson.
exemptions.
Just a second. Maybe we get staff to reply to that concern.
Sure, through the chair to Director Davidson. Yeah, understandable. That's a fair comment. So, and just to reiterate, this proposed revised exemption, which would see that elevation increase to 3.3 meters, as Director Davidson pointed out, is not based on the provincial guideline recommendation, but rather it's a solution that's been formulated at the staff level as a way to address these increasing FCLs and sort of balance that liability and retain that level of resiliency, so we don't feel like we're going backwards. But as Director Davidson noted, there is potential for these guidelines to be revised in the future. We know that the province is undertaking that project right now. So perhaps down the line, they will address this particular exemption in light of these increasing FCLs. But as of right now, they have not. So this is one option that staff has devised to address it.
Okay.
So thank you for that comment, Director Davidson.
Yeah, and thank you, Ms. Hipwell, for a nice explanation. I do apologize, Director Davidson, for interrupting you. Go ahead.
No worries. But going back to one of the earlier slides, just for clarity, when I'm looking at the changing of the existing exemptions, minor buildings going from 10 square meters to 20 square meters, and thank you, perfect. Just so it's clear in my mind, I guess what I'm struggling with is that if somebody can, for example, add a 50 square meter add-on to an existing dwelling below the FCL, can they do the same thing for example, if they had needed to double the size of a 100 square meter machine shed? You know, I'm thinking of agricultural use and things like that, or is things like agriculture related buildings out of scope of this? I'm just trying to understand. When I see minor buildings, I think of non-dwellings, but there's all other non-dwelling units as well. Sorry, other non-dwelling buildings that could be considerably larger that might need to change shape for whatever reason. And how does that factor in?
Sure. Thank you for that comment. And to address that through the chair to Director Davidson, you're exactly right. So we do have a number of other exemptions in our bylaw that are consistent with provincial guidelines that would address specifically agricultural buildings that are used for uses other than the housing of livestock. So there are very specific guidelines in that provincial document which allow us to create exemptions for those particular uses. This minor buildings ones is really an opportunity to address, small sheds and things of that nature.
One more, just clarification on the additions to existing dwellings. Is there any kind of, I'm thinking of somebody came to wanted to do an addition, 50 square addition to a dwelling, and then they get that approved, they get the exemption, and then 5 years later they come back and they want to do another addition, and 5 years after that, they, so on and so forth. Is there anything in there which basically prevents them from stacking on multiple additions? Or yeah, that's just my question.
Through the chair to Director Davidson. Yeah, excellent point. So we address that through the wording in the bylaw. Essentially, it's a one and done exemption. So there isn't an opportunity to continually come back and apply for that 25% addition.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm good.
Good. Thank you, Director Davidson. Director Castle.
Thank you. I fully support and appreciate the foresight of the exemption within the Nakoman Island Dike. When we spoke offline, I maybe didn't realize that the exemption was also being proposed for Dudney. So given some conversations that Director Davidson and I have had, I'd like to revisit that as a group if we can. But I appreciate the work that's being done to mitigate liability and risk to the residents. So thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Castle. And I believe that no decisions are expected today on this topic. Right. Thank you. Further discussion, directors? Hearing none. Thank you very much, Ms. Hipwell, for a very nice presentation. And I know a lot more about flooding on buildings than I used to. So.
Great. Thank you so much for your time.
Ms. Kinnaman, please.
Our next item is 5.2, which is the Cedar Network update and a presentation by David Urban.
Mr. Irwin, nice to see you again.
Likewise, Chair, and a little bit of deja vu here. So I had the opportunity to speak to the committee before, the RACs, and I'd like to do the same with these, just to bring everyone along related to this product we have called the Cedar Network. Name's David Urban, and Manager of Integrated Planning and Engagement, and within this department falls the Indigenous Relations portfolio. I took a quick look on the back end, and I noticed that the majority of the committee members are already signed up for this product, which is great to see. So thank you. Knowing that, I will cater the presentation kind of to your ability and knowledge level with that. So I'm going to start in. There's 8 different features that this Cedar Network has, and they're all interrelated. And I'll begin with the mapping component of it here. And this is a great place to start because you got the opportunity to look at a number of different First Nations throughout the entire region and beyond. I'm going to select one just for conversation point of view, and we're going to take Shawm today, and we're going to find out where exactly they're located, the number of reserves that they have within the area. You can see the context with the Google map that they're Highway 7, the Agassiz Rosedale Bridge, highlighted their land. And then as well, there's some affiliations we'll get into. They're associated with different tribes and tribal councils. And I note that because you'll see further on in the presentation what these associations mean. The next tab is the organizations. So here they're listed again, but slightly different. And right off the bat, you can see that alphabetical order, easy to find. But if you're not sure of spelling, you can always do a quick search with the search function up here. Here, we'll continue with the theme of Shem. And for those who are maybe unsure of proper pronunciation, there's a feature where we can listen and hear proper pronunciation. We'll do so now.
Chiam.
Shem. And I was explaining earlier to the last community meeting, this is quite a helpful tool. This website projects well onto your cell phones, and the ability when you're out in public, going into a meeting, if you need a refresher on a possible pronunciation, it's a tool that I've used. I know my colleagues have used as well. So let's go see what Shalom's about. You opening page here gives some context about what's happening with them. And you'll see pronunciation again, alternate spellings, some membership information, some notes, where they are on land code, explanation of what land code is, if they're in treaty, the reserves fall within the regional district. I find this functionality very useful. I will pull up the website. We'll see how it goes. And if you're looking for more information, it's a quick click and you're now with the Shawm First Nation. As well, if you want to pulse on what's happening, won't click on Facebook in this meeting, might be risky, but what you can see is what's happening from a community perspective through that. As well, affiliations with tribal council, you can see it's the Stolo Tribal Council, the tribe, the Palaut tribe, and one may wonder, well, what does this mean? Well, again, it's a hyperlink in. You can see that it's affiliated with 3 other communities, and just like before, you can hear pronunciation. Just do a quick exercise here.
Palaut.
Palaut tribe. Want to know more about it? Quick click. And Shalom has done a good job explaining what Palaut tribe is about. We continue on. The map feature that you saw before appears. There's also documents that were related to Palaut tribe and contact information if you need that as well. So just going to go back to Chum. and show the contact information. So here there's two sections, the governance, which is chief and council, and then down below, we have the staff contact information. This information up top gets scrubbed from the World Wide Web and updated through batches that I will review to verify and then approve. And then staff contact information is information that I tend to seek out, or others will inform me of changes and we'll make those updates. One may ask, how do we provide information? And I guess the best way to say that is, bear with me. Let's see, there is a button. If you need to fill me in with some information about this, ask for help. And this is one of the aspects that I'm looking to work and improve upon. You can see it wasn't the easiest to find, it's there, but these are improvements we can make for the site. As well, there's other modifications that I'm considering through discussions with others. One being the mapping feature. Is there a way to place a point on a map? And then see which First Nations may be of interest to engage with on a matter. Carrying on, there's a number of documents that are public information that we've consolidated into a resource library here. As well, the learning section, information that we have interest to people to broaden one's awareness and understanding. The library itself, we have over 85 resources. It's housed within the office here on the second floor, and one can sign out a book, get about 30 days and return it. There's articles of interest that maybe have subject matter that one wants to look. You can see tags below, and if there's a certain theme you'd want to kind of focus in on, one can search and find this information. All these resources are available to FERD staff, to our elected officials, our member municipality staff, and our elected officials at our member municipalities. Just to wrap up soon, we have a glossary of terms. This is an important aspect because people asked, as I was showing, well, what is a tribal council? As we go in, you can make your way down to T, and a brief explanation is provided, which will give some insight into what that is. And finally, questions that have come up over the years. This has been in place since 2016, and through that time period, people have asked questions, and some we think that others would like to ask themselves and maybe haven't, not as comfortable, and we've captured some of that here. The classic one I get quite often is, how many reserves are there in the FERD? Well, there's 146, held by 30. So good insight, quick information that's easily accessible. So on that, I'll end the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Urban. Questions, discussion, directors. Director Castle.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. I just want to know, was this created in-house?
Yes, so consulting firm was used to build the framework,
Okay.
but the knowledge and input was in-house.
I think it's an absolutely fantastic resource. It's very well put together. And just like the FERD mapping, which I get comments on all the time, we do this stuff really well. So thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Castle. Just question the library. I don't think I've ever run into the library. Where is this?
Thank you for asking, Chair Dickey. It is found in the second floor lunchroom area. And there's a bookshelf by the window there, and one uses the library checkout system here to retrieve a book from the library.
Good. I'll go and have a look. Thank you very much.
Great.
Any other discussion? Director Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Mr. Urban. When I saw the list of First Nations there, and some jumped out at me as being outside of the regional district, the Fraser Valley Regional District. Is it exhaustive outside of the regional district? I'm just curious about the scope of your data. Because specifically I saw one from Chemainus from Ladysmith. I was thinking, okay, this is FERD. How come? And maybe you could comment. Thank you.
Through the chair to Director Davison. Yeah, good eye there. You're right. It is more comprehensive than just to the regional district. Partly it is because some areas have traditional territories that come into the Fraser Valley Regional District. And then could be certain circumstances where you're right, they may be beyond the regional district, but for information purposes, they've been included.
So just to follow up, just for clarity then, so it's First Nations that are within the regional district as well as their interests outside of the regional district of those same First Nations.
Through the chair to Director Davison, yes, as well as those First Nations outside of the regional district that would have traditional territory within the region.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Davidson. Don't see any other lights on. Thank you once again, Mr. Urban. Very nice explanation, wealth of knowledge that we have at our fingertips now. And we'll turn things back to Ms. Kinnaman.
6.1 is the draft Electoral Area Services Committee meeting minutes of February 2nd, 2023.
For a motion, move Director Castle, second Director Adamo. Any more errors, omissions, discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, contrary, motion carries.
Item 7.1 is the FVRD privacy breach policy. There is a motion for your consideration.
Good. Promotion, move Director Dixon, second Director Wardenberg. Discussion. Okay, so this came up to our board, and at the time I was not sure what this encompassed, and maybe Ms. Van Ness would like to explain. I didn't realize, I've learned since then that it appears this doesn't direct or is not directed to verbal discussion. This is more of a written email type concern. Yeah.
That's correct, Chair Dickey. So perhaps it might be good if I provide a little bit of an overview to the committee on this draft policy that's before you. So back in December of last year, there were some changes made to the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act that requires all local governments to have a privacy management program effective February 1st. The FERD does have a privacy management program. And as part of that, local governments are required to have a documented process to deal with privacy breaches. And the draft policy before you would be that documented process. And as you, Chair Dickey pointed out, this policy would not affect verbal conversations. Now, of course, any type of verbal conversations would be subject to confidentiality under the Code of Responsible Conduct and the confidentiality provisions under the Community Charter. It might be helpful if perhaps I provide a couple examples of privacy breaches. So that would be an example of, like a hacker gets into our website and some information is taken, whether that be, personal information, and that could be anything. That could be credit card information, it could be personal email addresses or phone numbers. In that case, that would be a privacy breach. And we would use this policy, myself as the privacy officer, to manage that privacy breach. We will be offering privacy awareness training for our elected officials and our staff coming up. But certainly this policy is a documented process. It doesn't exceed any of the provisions already set out under the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. And it's certainly a best practice to have this documented practice in policy.
Good. Thank you, Ms. Van Ness. And good reminder to all of us that being public figures, the standards that we're held to are somewhat more advanced than the general public, and we should be careful about our conversations and written responses maybe. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the policy, contrary, the motion carries. And Ms. Kinman, once again.
8.1 is public feedback on the FVRD 2023 to 2027 financial plan. It's an information verbal report from our CFO, Kelly Lonsborough.
Okay, good afternoon. So I would like to provide a short update on the FVRD's consultation process for the 2023 to 2027 financial plan. Each year, the FVRD's process is evolving in efforts to meet and or exceed the Local Government Act's requirement for public consultation of the financial plan. We continue to strive for transparency, balanced with providing meaningful information at the right points in time. For example, we did so after the full board viewed and received and provided input on the full financial plan at the Committee of the Whole mid-February. So this year, following that Committee of the Whole meeting on February 16th, our teams worked to publish the financial plan on the Have Your Say website. This information went live on February 17th, and we closed the official feedback period on March 3rd in order to allow time to review and consider any impacts on the budget. The site includes graphical representation of the FVRD and its high-level financial impact, summary information, timelines, a section for frequently asked questions, a timeline of the financial plan's development process, detailed presentations for each of the budgets, as well as municipal and electoral area summaries. Members of the public were able to post comments on the site or send emails directly to the finance department. We use social media to draw attention to the site and invite participation. The detailed presentations for each budget, as well as municipal and electoral area summaries, were all printed and available at our reception with forms ready for members of the public to provide in-person written feedback. In addition to the website, we created a brochure for board member reference and or distribution. In terms of actual engagement and feedback we received, we had 107 site visits, and we had 4 documented comments on the site. Each will be included as an appendix in the board report for the budget that is coming forward in March. We will also include our responses to each of those comments. So one of those comments, an individual inquired about readiness for floods. One inquired what we do with the money we get and requested that we stop Airbnbs. Another focused on quarries, and the last one commented about displeasure with the public consultation process. One phone call to the finance team, the individual was encouraged to document his comments on the Have Your Say site, and that individual was an Area C resident requesting taxes not exceed 6%. We had no visitors to the reception area. We will not be making any amendments to the financial plan based on this feedback received to date, but we will continue to review our processes and strive to improve the public consultation processes going forward. So, thank you.
Good, thank you, Ms. Lounsborough. Director Castle.
Thank you, Chair Dickey, through you to staff. Thank you for this report. My questions are, is the process and the data this year consistent with previous years?
Thank you, Director Castle, through the chair. This process is consistent, and I would say, and then some. So a few years ago, there was a newspaper publication requesting public feedback at the board meetings. From there on in, we a couple of years ago, when I joined the FVRD, we started publishing all of the budget documents on our website. And then last year, we began using the Have Your Say website. So this year, we had an expanded process timeline. We had an expanded timeline. I will note last year's timeline was condensed because we had the atmospheric river. So the timeline was expanded this year as much as we could, knowing we also had an election. So we also had a condensed timeline. And we added the printed versions at the reception area. So we know we've made incremental improvements, and we're already discussing ways that we can publish information throughout the year. So we're trying to think of new ways to engage and encourage that feedback and improve it even better for next year.
Thank you. And the data, so the the 107 visits, 4 comments, is that consistent?
I believe so. I think it was under 10 last year as well. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Castle. Director Davidson.
Thank you. So on the Have Your Say website, perhaps I've misinterpreted things somehow, but I think when I was looking at the February board agenda, I recall one of the items there was to the motion being put forward before the board was to publish the budget on the FERD website on the Have Your Say site, which was really well done, by the way. But what I hadn't realized was that it was only going to be up after the February 23rd board meeting for 1 week. So my own little journey on this one involved, after processing the events of the February 23rd full board meeting, that was on a Thursday, Sunday, Monday, it occurred to me, oh yeah, I better let people know that, just to the technical staff, I am getting an echo again, but I'll keep on. So what I had noticed on the, let me try that again. On my own journey on this involved, I think it was Monday or Tuesday, thinking I better get this information out to my own email distribution list. It goes out to Facebook. But I had to send it out with an apology saying that there was only like 2 days left before you could reply. So when I look at that and I think that, I'm not really surprised that there were only 4 responses, because the time frame is very limited. And I don't know if I misinterpreted the board agendas when they went out by thinking that nothing would be available on the Have Your Say website until the February 23rd board was concluded. But yeah, so I guess at the end of the day, if this was a misunderstanding on my part, I'll try to do better next time. But the time frame for public feedback is very tight, nonetheless. Even if it says 2 weeks, I'm hoping we can do better in the future. Okay.
Thank you, Director Davidson. Staff, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Chair Dickey, and through the chair to Director Davidson. We did publish the material after the committee of the whole meeting. That was February 17th. So the committee meeting was the 16th. We published the site on the 17th. When we spoke of the public consultation period, we advised that it would close on March 3rd, and that's to allow our time and preparation to get the agenda out for the March deadlines. So we have an internal deadline of this Friday, March 10th, to have the budget and its associated report and the bylaws all rolled up into a report for finalization into the agenda package. So closing the public consultation on March 3rd really only allowed our staff 1 week to digest any feedback and contemplate whether or not there were changes necessary. And as a matter of fact, there were other changes that we're making, not resulting from the public consultation, but from the recent funding announcement for ECOM funding. So our teams are really busy working on the updates. Thank you.
And if I can just further add to that, one of the challenges with regional district budgeting, as you are all now painfully aware, is how iterative of a process it is. And so starting public consultation before you even had a chance to digest the budget would be difficult, but certainly staff are looking at opportunities for advertising those decision points along the way more broadly for future years, so that more members of the public can ask you those questions at the various committee of the whole meetings that happen throughout the early months of the year.
Good. Thank you, staff. Any further discussion? Certainly, I think all of us, especially electoral area directors, understand what a complicated procedure it is to create all these budgets for us in all our different service areas. So we're very appreciative and very understanding of the timelines that people have to deal with. So thank you once again. So that was an information item. So we'll turn things back to Ms. Kinley.
Thank you. So 8.2 is a 2022 grant and aid financial accountability reporting. It is an information item, but happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any discussion, Director Castle?
Thank you, Chair Dickey, through you to staff. I might have missed this in the report. The deadline for reporting on these? When is that deadline?
I think I'll turn things over to our CFO, Kelly Lonsborough, to speak to this item.
Thank you. Thank you through the chair to Director Castle. I do believe it's the end of the year, but I will actually deflect a little bit and ask my colleague Beth Klein just to confirm. Or actually, I see Kinga Williams. Kinga wrote the report. She's an accountant on our team, so Kinga will have the expert information. Thank you.
So I believe we gave successful applicants a deadline of February 10th to reply.
Thank you. And is the reporting, is that a requirement for future applications? If they want to apply for additional funds in a subsequent year, will that reporting need to be filed before that can be approved?
Ms. Williams?
So I believe through our current grant and aid process, there are no restrictions to applicants that have received reports in the past, or sorry, grants in the past that haven't reported on those.
Okay, thank you.
Good, thank you, Ms. Williams, and thank you, Director Castle. Any further discussion? Director Dixon, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mine is just a comment, really. When I was looking through there and seeing all the activities and the pictures and the report that was put together, there really is a lot of good things going on in our electoral area. So I wanted to thank you for that. It's nice to see that.
Good, thank you, Director Dixon. Seeing no further discussion and this being an information item, we'll turn things back to Ms. Kinley.
Sure. So 8.3 is a 2023 grant and aid application for the Boston Bar Community Charities Association in Electoral Area A.
For a motion. Move Director Johnson, second Director Wardenberg. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, contrary, motion carries.
Item 8.4 is a 2023 grant and aid request for the Sunshine Valley Ratepayers Association in Electoral Area B.
Move Director Adamo and second Director Dixon. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Oh, contrary, motion carries.
Item 8.5 is a 2023 grant and aid request for the Post Creek Ratepayers Association in Electoral Area E.
Motion Director Makahonic, second Director Johnson. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor, contrary, motion carries.
Item 9.1 is an information item. It's the Cultus Lake zoning bylaw update. It's a progress report for March 2023.
That is for information. Any discussion, directors? Hearing none, all in favor, or there is no discussion or no vote on this. Pardon me, we'll move back to Ms. Kinley.
Thank you. So item 9.2 is an update to development application fees bylaw number 1560. It is an information item, but I know that there were a number of questions from directors before this meeting, and staff would be happy to provide some overview remarks if you would entertain them, Chair Dickey.
Good, that sounds wonderful. Mr. Shadden, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rafiq Shadman, planner at the EA Planning Department, and the topic of presentation today is development application fee bylaw update. The purpose of this presentation is to start a discussion about increase in application fees, application cost recovery, as well as overall planning revenue increase. So I'll start with the current fee bylaw. Our current fee bylaw was updated in 2019, and since then we haven't changed the application fees. And similar to other years, during the budget discussions, there were directions passed to increase the planning revenue by 25%. In order to do that, we have to increase the application fees, which will lead to two things. Firstly, we will increase our annual cost recovery, and we will also decrease reliance on tax requisition. So cost of processing application currently is $600,000, which is approximately 50% of staff time. The 50% of staff time was determined during our last development application fee bylaw update. And this time is solely used to review, process, and write reports for development applications. EA Planning Department has other job functions. We respond to public inquiries at the counter through emails, phone calls. There's Crown referrals, building permit review, as well as general administrative tasks. Besides that, we also work on long-range planning projects. Some of the projects that you might be familiar with are Consolidated Zoning Bylaw Update, Cultus Lake Zoning Bylaw Update, or the Harrison Mills Neighborhood Plan. The average annual revenue is $69,850. And this was an average from 2019 to 2022. The reason we have an average is because we have years where we have lower volume of applications and then years with higher volume of applications. So this average will allow us to achieve a better understanding of the application fees. The average cost recovery is something that we achieved from our average annual revenue, which is currently 10 to 12%. So as I mentioned, right now, FVRD's cost recovery is 12%, which as you can see is comparable with other regional districts. We have Caribou Regional Districts, TNRD, Thompson-Nicola Regional Districts, Regional District of North Okanagan, and Regional District of Nanaimo. I must inform you that cost comparison, or what we call benchmarking, has its disadvantage. The reason I say that is because every regional district is unique. Where it's located, the population, the complexity of development applications, and the complex landscape can play a huge role in determining the number of applications we receive. It also aligns with our local government act, which requires us to establish development fees based on administration, reviewing and processing cost, and not comparing it to other jurisdictions. So what does an increase in 25% in planning revenue lead to? So we have to increase our total revenue from $69,850 to $87,310, which is approximately an increase of $17,500. So staff explored two options, and this is for the purpose of discussion. The first option is a 15% increase in application fee in 2023, which will lead to a total revenue of $84,675 and an increased net revenue of 21 to 23%. So very close to the targeted goal, which is 25%. And then with option two, we will increase the application fee by 20% in 2023, and the total revenue is $87,900, which will lead to an increased revenue of 24 to 26%. So we talked about the increased revenue, but what does it do for our cost recovery? So as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, right now we're at 12%. And if we go with option one, which is on the left-hand side, we will be achieving the cost recovery of 14%, which is an increase of 2%. And then if we go with option two, it will increase to 15%. So we have room for improvement. The annual incremental increase. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we haven't done any amendments to our development application fee bylaw since 2019. Staff realized it would be ideal to start this discussion around incremental increase from 2024 to 2027. So we wouldn't be coming up with any other bylaw amendments. These two options are for discussion purposes. As you can see, with a 5% incremental increase in 2024, our estimated cost recovery is 14.9%. And in 2027 is 15.8. And with 10%, we'll be at 15.6% cost recovery and 18.9 in 2027. The reason we are recommending an incremental increase is because it will keep up with the consumer price index or inflation. It will help us with improved cost recovery, and it will help us balance of not discouraging applications, but at the same time, increasing our cost recovery annually. So what does it mean for our report in April? So as I mentioned, this is just for discussion purposes. In April, we plan to bring the differential fee increase. I would like to highlight that it's not our intention to increase the fee for individual property owners or homeowners. We're targeting large-scale complex development applications. So for example, if we get a 50-lot subdivision or a very complex rezoning and OCP amendment applications, which will lead to an increase in land value, because it will create higher density for that land, We're targeting those applications, and that's why we're going to bring a differential fee increase in April. We're also going to bring some free scenario comparison. So we have neighboring jurisdictions around us. We're looking at their application fee, and we will come up with some mock scenarios for some mock development. Could be a rezoning subdivision, could be a commercial versus residential. And we will highlight all the fees for other jurisdictions and what it looks like in comparison to FVRD. With that, I would like to end my presentation, and Hasib and I would be here to answer any questions if you have it. So thank you.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Shadman. Discussion directors, Director Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff. The principle that I took from, thank you for the presentation, that the principle I'm taking away is that you're looking at basically, what's the right way to do it? I don't want to use the word skew, but it's the only word that's coming to mind. Skewing the increases towards large value developments. Is it the principle that sort of intuitively came to me would be skewing the fees based on level of effort required by staff. And I'm getting that echo again, so I'll slide my headset off, speak through my mic. So yeah, just are they basically one and the same anyway? Is this basically larger value just means more staff effort? Is it more or less a one-to-one correlation, if you follow where I'm going on this one? Thank you.
Thank you, Director Davidson. Through Chair to Director Davidson. With larger complex applications, there's more time invested towards those applications. If you know, FVRD has multiple hazardous areas, and we need to review a lot of technical reports, which could be geohazard reports, riparian area reports. There could be countless public information meetings and meetings with other jurisdictions. In order to have those requirements satisfied, it requires a lot of staff time to complete those requirements, which is a consideration that we're taking into account to make sure that, you know, this large scale developments have higher fees because it requires more staff time.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Shadman. Thank you, Director Davidson. Director Castle.
Thank you, Chair Dickey. I just, first of all, want to say I'm very impressed and thankful to staff for their nimbleness, ability to be nimble. The fact that this just came in February and we already have a report in front of us. The report is going into a lot greater consideration than what I was considering when we raised this. So I want to thank staff for that work. I also want to thank Director Danilus for his responses to my email questions, and I know that those questions were shared with the other members of EASC, and we did get answers. I do want to just make sure that those questions are noted for the record, and just kind of my thoughts on it. I asked about, you know, regional districts are allowed to fully recover expenses, but we only see a small recovery, and I asked why. I just want to note that I support recovering as much as possible, especially from those large complex development applications. I asked about seeing the rates of cost recovery within the municipalities of the FVRD, and you've indicated that that will be coming in the April report, so thank you for that. And I fully support, I asked about the differentials and making sure that we're not discouraging individual homeowners from doing the right thing and going through the right process, but in fact focusing on recovering our costs on these large scale developments. And I just want to say thank you for including the numbers for the 10% increase. It's helpful for me to see that. And I just want to say, don't be afraid to provide aggressive options in your report. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Castle.
Oh.
Director Adamo.
Thanks very much. Great presentation through the chair to staff. Good work. I had a couple of things and I don't know if I missed it somewhere. You mentioned that we were going to be working as hard as possible to compare to our surrounding municipalities. Is that correct? To see where we stand from a number point of view, if we're all on the same page or similar?
Through chair to Director Demo. For sure, we will be comparing to our neighboring jurisdictions. We will have some mock scenarios. So say we will have a 50 lot subdivision and what the application fee looks like, say for the city of Abbotsford or city of Chilliwack. And then maybe we will have some other regional districts as well. And we will compare the application fee for those jurisdictions versus FVRDs in the upcoming report.
Great. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you, Director Adamo. Director Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate it and helps clarify quite a few things. I just wanted to kind of add my support to Director Castle in that I would support a as much high a cost of recovery as we can. I will admit when I read that, you know, it's about $6,000 for the FVRD taxpayer cost to me, I sort of that really took me aback because I guess I'd never thought about it, wasn't really aware of it. And my question really was, why am I supporting, why are the taxpayers supporting a $600,000 bill to help support a developer? And I'm still sitting here not completely clear on that. I have read the report and I understand that, yes, typically that it might be because there could be some improvements in my area. I think a flip side, and I really do hope this will be considered, as many people who live in the rural area live there because it's a rural area. And that's why we live there. And a development, a large one anyway, really does take away from that. And so that I think is part of my challenge is trying to balance that out.
Good. Thank you, Director Dixon. Okay, don't see any other lights on. So staff, you have some feedback from directors and you're able to go forward now and craft something for our next meeting?
For sure. Thank you, Chair. I'll definitely do that.
Thank you again, Mr. Shadman. And Ms. Kim.
Our next item is 9.3, which is Development Variance Permit 2023-01 to reduce the setback for a manure pit at 40628 Lougheed Highway in Electoral Area G.
For a motion. To Director Castle, second Director Dixon. Any discussion or no? Okay. All those in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
9.4 is Development Variance Permit 2022-15 to increase the maximum size for an accessory building at 10371 Parkwood Drive in Electoral Area D.
Good. Motion. Director Dixon moves. Second Director Makahonic. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
9.5 is covenants for the protection of the environment, protection from geohazards and site servicing relating to the subdivision of land and construction of a medical care center at 46090 Lougheed Highway in Electoral Area C.
For a motion, Director Wardenberg, second Director Adamo. Any discussion? Director Dixon, go ahead.
It's not really discussion, but I really am. I would appreciate, because I have read this, just a little clarification on what, I guess what it means, if that makes any sense at all.
Staff.
Thank you. Through the chair to Director Dixon. The covenants would implement requirements that come out of the environmental review of the property around environmentally sensitive trees and so on the property, and also establish servicing requirements. That it's a medical health center. It's really wonderful to see this coming forward. In order to expedite it, we looked at on-site servicing. The covenant would provide that when the day comes that there's a community sanitary sewer, for example, that the development connect to the community system. But in the meantime,
is fully able to operate on the basis of a standalone site-specific system. So that's the purpose of the covenant, and we've got an agreement with the proponents to all of these things.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Dallas. Very nice explanation. Thank you, Director Dixon. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
9.6 is major official community plan and zoning amendments to facilitate the redevelopment of the gravel pit at 43837 and 43873 Lougheed Highway, Electoral Area C, into a residential subdivision with commercial and multifamily land uses. And Chair Dickey, staff do have a short presentation for this item.
Good. Would you like that prior to the item getting on the table, or?
As you wish, either way.
Okay, so this is a motion that's on the table, defer consideration of bylaws to facilitate the redevelopment of the existing gravel pit located at 43837 and 43873 Lougheed Highway, Electoral Area C, to a future meeting of the FERD board. Do we have a motion? Director Wardenberg moves the staff recommendation. Second, Director Dixon, and the staff presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Staff have a few introductory comments that I hope will shed light on the staff report that's on the agenda and the recommendations put forward by staff. GWeb Holdings has made applications to amend the community plan and zoning bylaws to facilitate the development of 155 single-family homes with suites, 68 townhouses, about 96,000 square feet of multifamily residential, and about 1.2 hectares of employment lands at the Lake Eric gravel pit site on the Lougheed Highway in Area C. The development would add somewhere between 290 and 445 residential units and approximately 1,000 people to the local population. Now that could potentially almost double the Area C population. And it's the biggest single development application that I've seen in the electoral areas. When staff are looking at major development proposals like this one, we think about alignment with community planning principles and certainly our own regional growth strategy, which we're obliged to consider by statute. But these kinds of principles include ideas like development should be supported by the range of services that are necessary to support the residents. And development should be integrated into and connected with the community that exists within. Major new development should be less car dependent and provide for pedestrian connectivity and even connection to transit where that's feasible. New development should connect with regional amenities and should benefit the broader community, not just the development site. And we consider that development should pay for itself without additional tax burden on existing residents. Right now, there are no land use, servicing, or financial plans in place to support this development. And we know that existing services would need upgrades to support the new residents that it would bring. The sites outside the regional growth boundaries, so those are the areas set out in the regional growth strategy where major developments and growth are planned to occur. The area is car dependent, not served by transit, and active transportation and transit needs need to be considered. And the site's some distance, perhaps 20 kilometers from grocery stores and important amenities that are within Mission and Agassiz. Site's also isolated from the Lake Eric community. It's across the rail line and also Highway 7 from the Lake Eric community. And we know that residents on both sides of the highway will want to access the lake or trails on the hillside, and they'll want to form relationships and social connections throughout the community. And these things need to be considered and facilitated through pedestrian connections, for example. So these are considerable challenges to overcome in the context of processing development applications. And that's why staff previously recommended that a neighborhood plan precede the development applications. Yet we also see that the proposed development could potentially provide compelling benefits to the community. So in the opinion of staff, it merits consideration. And these potential benefits include increased supply of housing and certainly an increase in the form of housing, the housing options that's needed in the community. Community sanitary sewer system for the development, but also for Scowlitz First Nation. That's an important potential community benefit that this development will bring about. And also it would bring relief from noise, dust, visual impacts that are associated with the existing gravel pit. To move forward, there's some critical gaps that staff recommend need addressing. The proponents done a great job of demonstrating the capacity of the site itself through technical reports. And the gaps that I'm going to talk about largely relate to off-site considerations, like how the development integrates with Lake Erie, the impact that development would have on regional district services and utilities broadly, including the volunteer fire department, parks, solid waste facilities. It's really critical, we think, to understand services and infrastructure improvements that will be needed to support the development and its residents, what they'll cost, how they'll be paid for, who will pay, and what kind of impacts that this expanded services or infrastructure would have on current taxpayers. And we need a strong consultation process to engage the community, First Nations, school district, and others to meet our statutory obligations, but also simply to meet community expectations for inclusion and dialogue when they see really major developments in their community. These are things that are typically addressed through neighborhood plan processes. And some of these things I suggest need to be done by the regional district itself. But as I said, the proponents done a good job of assessing site conditions, site considerations, but it's not realistic, I think, for the developer to assess long-term sustainability of FERD services. That's something probably best done by us. The staff report identifies these gaps and it outlines a path forward. It sets out the gaps that the developer can address, the gaps that we're best positioned to fill, and the need for capacity funding that would enable us to address our gaps in a timely way. Planning staff would be in a position to confidently draft OCP policies and the zoning amendments that enable the development when these gaps are addressed. But I'll emphasize the intent of the staff report was to identify a responsible path forward. It acknowledges the challenges, but also recognizes the potential for what we think could be compelling community benefits that the development could bring to the community, including to Scowlitz First Nation. The path that we're recommending enables consideration of critical long-term impacts, particularly to financial sustainability for regional district services. And it provides opportunity for full consultation that's appropriate to the scale and impact of the proposed development. Thank you very much. I appreciate taking a few minutes to introduce the staff report on this item.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Daniluz. And I understand that the proponents perhaps would like to make a presentation. That's somewhat irregular during this open meeting, but we certainly understand that this is a very important development proposal, and we would be pleased to make that allowance. It was a very short statement that was made by the proponents.
Thanks very
Mr.
much.
Baker, nice to see you.
Thanks very much for allowing me to speak today. My name is Andrew Baker. I'm the applicant. I'm with the company Applin & Martin. And we have spoke about this project a few times and been working on it for a couple of years now. I had one other request, and I can understand if you don't want me to, if you don't want to allow it, but Joey Chapman, who is a Scowlitz councillor, it would also like to speak either before or after me, just for a brief amount of time, just to put his perspective on things, because they are our partner in this project. And they're also pretty keen on the ideas. They see a lot of benefits for their community. So I guess that was a question through your chair.
You would like Mr. Chapman to speak following yourself or during the public question?
He could speak before me and then I would continue on, or I guess he could wait until the general public questions.
Yeah. Okay. That's okay. That'll be fine. Mr. Chapman, did you want to speak?
CMCI, hola toto squi, Talikla Scowlitz. I get pretty nervous when I come up here and speak publicly.
Well, we're all very interested in making this a very fair process and certainly respect your input on this. So please don't feel nervous. We're all trying to work together.
Yeah, just first off, I want to thank you for, recognizing the territories of the Chilkoyak tribe. My Hwalmok Squee comes from Chilliwack Lake. I really want to make it loud about reconciliation. What do you think about reconciliation? I went through email and I don't know, the consensus just didn't make sense. It said there's 1,000 people within the Area C communities when, the First Nations communities weren't even acknowledged. There's 1,000 alone in Chehalis. And when I talk about reconciliation, the company that approached us with this Harrison Rise project, they came to us first because they know that was on our unceded territory. I brought them forth to the elders. We have a lot of elders in our community. I brought them forth to our chief and council, which the chief and council, I sit on council, the chief directed me to stand by them and speak on their behalf. And to hear all this stuff that's going on behind the scenes just to kind of hold up this project, it's not right for all the benefits that it can do for my community. Not only my community, I sit on the board with Lake Huron Community. I sit with Mike. I sit with all of them. And I'm just not too happy. It's not good. I'm here speaking alone. But I will, make sure I talk to Willie Charlie and I talk to Philip Sherwood, who's on council for Lacamo, and they will, it's going to get bad before it gets good. And, I'm just here to speak on Scouts' behalf. And, I just hear everything. I'm not happy at all. And yeah, I'm just trying to, thank you so much.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chapman. And we certainly do understand that this is a very big project for everyone involved. I don't think any of us are averse to seeing a development go ahead there, but I think there are many people involved and it's important that we get this right from the start. And I'm sure we can work towards that. Directors, are any further discussion? Yeah, I'll allow that. Okay.
Can I still make?
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry.
We'll just let Director Johnson speak and then we'll move on. Go
Well,
ahead.
I just have some random thoughts as Graham was delivering his information. And I guess it depends where you hail from. 20 kilometers does not seem far to go to a grocery store or to a medical clinic. I don't think that should be a stumbling block. I think that's all in perspective. And schools are usually built in accordance to population. So as there is a need, I see services developing. I don't think you would build a school and hope somebody's going to come and show up, or build a medical clinic and then say, let's build a village. So from the way I see it, need for future services would also mean future employment. Housing is needed and certainly more attractive than a gravel pit. Historically, towns were built and services come about as needed, as I've already said. And to prolong the whole process by another year, a year and a half for a developer, could actually see the whole project come to a halt and a gravel pit just remain there. So, I mean, I read and I reread And certainly this is very new to me, goes without saying, so I don't have a lot of experience, but I am trying to understand the process. And I'm wondering, have staff made it clear for the developers as to what is needed in order to move forward? Or is the developer left in a state of confusion? Because I myself was a little confused by some of it. And then I was wondering, are the goalposts being moved? Thank you.
Good, thank you, Director Johnson. Director McMahon.
Yeah, so I put a lot of time into researching and reading, and there was a lot to read. One of the first meetings I had as a new director was with the developers, and before I did that, I spoke to we were all new directors, spoke to Mel, and then before I met the second time, I met with Mel again, and then I spoke to Mel last night. And I know this is a fairly elevated and emotional, it could be an emotional project, but I think the bottom line is just looking at the facts. And I mean, I also kind of align with Diane on, I think that what we're asking is too much after having them do the second option, which was to proceed with an application-led process, meeting all of that. And I think the whole complex neighborhood planning process, I think is moving the goalpost. I talked to some of the mayors. Like I've done my research and really think that there could be, and I think ethically, we probably need to look at something in between that we can address some of this with, and to make sure that we can come together for a win-win. For the developer and for our First Nations and for the regional district, because I think we run the danger of running something that's a year and a half that is extremely costly, and we end up having a lose for Fraser Valley Regional District, for our First Nations, and for potential for jobs and all of that. I really am concerned. So I would really hope that there is another way going forward that would meet that, because I really would hate like heck to see this, because I don't know, is there another opportunity if this falls through for Scallops people to be able to have this? I mean, and it's no secret, I am a strong proponent of housing. I work with people every day, families that are struggling. There is not enough housing. There's no affordable housing. I know that, the employers in Harrison, employers in Mission cannot find enough staff because there's no housing. I mean, and personally, family always say, Patty, you always live in Timbuktu. I mean, I'm like 12 kilometers from the nearest anything, which is the closest I've ever lived to anything. So it is all a matter of perspective. And, and if nothing goes there, there's going to be a gravel pit, and there'll be blasting and complaining. And I was the chair of the Fraser Valley Gravel Committee, and I was at town halls, people up in arms over blasting and noise and dust and all of that. So, I mean, I think there's always going to be issues, and I don't want to come across like I'm not supporting, but I think there's a right thing to do. And I really ethically think that, if we've in good faith asked for this to happen, and the developer has in good faith done what they've been requested to do, then we need to come up with something that's going to work, not a this or a this where everybody, it could be, I just am really concerned about that, missed opportunities, and a community where, people could really be put back, and they have some hope here. So, do I have the perfect answer? But I think there's a better answer than that. I really do. And I really hope that people have open hearts and minds to look at that. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Makahonik. Director Wardenberg.
Yes, oh, how am I gonna put this? I am in 100% support of the Scouts, First Nations and the sovereignty over that land. I thank Joey for coming here. To you, that will never change. We are looking at one of the largest developments in an electoral area. That's a fact. Happens to be on your land, Joey. And it's very important that we work through this and we get this development right for everyone involved. The staff report is very comprehensive. Very comprehensive. The notes, the letters from the developer, and well done. Everything's been covered. Regional district, it's all here. I've read it twice, 3 times, some of it. I hope, there are some benefits, and there are a lot of benefits, and the biggest is the Scouts First Nation is going to benefit, and the reconciliation is incredibly important. There's also the challenges that are involved, and we have to work through those. You know them, you've identified them, you've worked through half of them, maybe a little bit more. I am hoping that we can all work through the other part of this and through some agreements that we can move forward with this development and hopefully Area C will be a better place. It's a big project. It'll be a long project. Nothing good comes overnight. Every well-planned project is better than an ill-advised project or unplanned project, you might say. We're trying to do that. We're trying to understand the capacity, the needs of the Scouts, First Nations, and the needs of the residents that live there. We all live together on your land, and we share it, and we will continue to do that. And yeah, I also echo the concerns of the other directors and how it's so important to move this forward. How we're going to do that? Leave that to staff, and the motion stands right now. I'm hoping that the discussion with this capacity funding, maybe we can create another or that through that discussion with the developer, maybe that will return a different proposal before the board at another time, or in addition to this motion. If that's at all possible, I'm not sure, but at the end of the day, yeah, it's a big change for Area C. It's a huge improvement to the Scouts, First Nations, and it has got 100% of my support, and we will work through this. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Wardenberg. And Mr. Baker, you wanted to make a short presentation.
Yes, I would. Thanks very much. My comments are from the cuff a little bit. This is a new report, and so I may get some things a little bit off, but the intent is to prompt discussion and to continue this process and get to a good solution for everybody. So the corporate report is recommending additional studies. So we don't have issue with answering the questions posed by FERD, but we are requesting that this be done as a condition of approval. We are seeking approval, at least first reading, and we would like to work towards third on our land use and our density. We have put together a considerable benefits package for the community, for Scotland's First Nation. These are expensive items, and to continue on studying with no understanding of support from this, from the directors is really not workable. Our client has funded this project and significant studies. We have prepared a huge list of studies, which the staff have. So I've got kind of a few bullets here I want to jump through, and they're not in any particular order, and I'll apologize for that before I start here. So we have our kind of our process letter, which is laid out in March the 11th, 2022, our path forward. We followed it. We've completed, I think, everything on that list. Now, obviously, a letter like that is always caveated that the FERD staff can change their mind about things, but we did, in all honesty, we followed everything in there, and we had the public consultation meetings. And then last fall, there was an FERD public consultation led process that we went and attended, and I think I spoke there for a couple, 3 hours or something. So Scalowitz First Nation are our partner on this project, and when I read the report, I feel that their needs are not really front and center in this. It's a bit disappointing because they're good partners and they're good people, and I've got to know them well. I've got to know their elders. I got to know their council, and Joey especially. This is a good nation, and they are truly trying to find opportunities for themselves. You know, I speak from the heart on this stuff. I'm a white guy, grew up in British Columbia, and I had probably very archaic views about First Nations, and this job has given me the opportunity to learn a ton about First Nations in the Fraser Valley Regional District, and especially Chehalis, Lacamo, and Scalowitz First Nation, great people, and all of them support us. Scalowitz First Nation, obviously, we have an MOU with them. They support us wholly. We have a letter from Lacamo, and Chehalis, I've met with them, and we have verbal support from them. They're more distance from us, but they are in support of us also. So one of the things that Joey mentioned earlier was the corporate report is suggesting that the population of Area C is around 1,100 people. This is the report, and I think Graham Denaluz is using the census information from the federal Canada, from the federal government. We believe the population in Area C is more like 2,300 people. I think that the federal government excludes First Nations for some reason. So although our project is big, I don't think it's going to double the population as far as I understand it. Once again, may have my facts incorrect, but yeah, this is what my research told us.
Mr. Baker, please, Director Castle.
Sorry, I just heard, I think. Do we know, in fact, if the census data includes First Nations?
Thank you through the chair to Director Castle. The number that I referenced today is from Statistics Canada from the 2021 Community Profile Census for Area C. We'll investigate further and whether what populations it includes, but just taking it at face value, it represents the population at 1,200 people.
Thank you, Director
Davidson.
Director Davidson.
Yeah, I can attest to the fact, having looked at it in some detail, that Stats Canada does segregate First Nations from non-First Nations in the Census Canada. You have to keep in mind that you could quite easily have a reserve which straddles an electoral area boundary. Not that we do here, but you could, in which case it's arguable as to what particular electoral area reserve population would reside on, because the electoral area boundaries don't run across reserves. So yeah, and I'm just sharing that factoid. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Davidson. We'll turn things back to Mr. Baker.
Thanks very much. Our research would tell us that there's 2,300 people in electoral area C. That's what we've researched ourselves.
Yep.
The housing needs for this community, like all communities out in British Columbia, are significant. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to observe people living in trailers on the low heat highway right near this gravel pit. And even when I went and had lunch here in the lovely city of Chilliwack, there's people, homeless people right in your park here in town. Housing needs is a real issue. I don't know why I have to keep speaking to councils about this. This is a real issue, and housing needs can't wait. People are living in trailers now. So I'm not sure why we're always getting resistance on it. This is not even something I wanted to speak about, but it is a real issue. And I share the concern. You know, I have kids, I have family members. This is a real issue. And studying things is not going to get housing. This project is going to take probably 10 years to build out. Mel Wardenberg has identified that. He's probably absolutely correct. They take a long time. And we're probably a year and a half away, even if we had approval today, of ever even having a lot or anything ready to build out there. So this housing is not going to be there instantaneously. These take a long time. It's a complicated process. So there's some comments in the FERD report that I wanted to clarify. We're not petitioning to get into the Lake of Rock water utility. We're building our own system at the recommendation or the discussion with FERD staff. We've suggested that we would interconnect the two as an emergency measure. We have met with the local school district. We had a Teams call with them. Our planning staff met with them. They didn't express any concern about the local elementary school. There's obviously concerns about secondary school because the kids are bused into Mission, as I understand it. But no concern about elementary school children. Lake of Rock community have made it very clear they don't want to encourage any access to people outside of their community. I don't really know why we would want to study this right now. We're just sort of poking the bear. That community likes what they've got. They don't want us around. They don't want anybody go in there. BC Transit, as all of us know, BC Transit does not come and bring service to an area until they see the people. They need to see the whites of their eyes. That's the way it works. We have this project, we have interconnected a whole series of walking trails throughout the project. We've got sidewalks on all the roads. We have an active park, tons of passive park. We've connected as much as we can. We do not believe that our project will affect the water quality of Lake of Rock. And in fact, we're providing them an opportunity for a future expansion of the wastewater treatment plant so they can get off their septic systems one day. This was discussed very briefly, but it was discussed with FERD engineering staff way back at the beginning of this process. We did meet with the local fire chief and some of the volunteers at the local station over on the Low Heat Highway in Corey Castle's area. We obviously don't have a report from them or anything, but they didn't tell us that this was an impossible thing. And we purposely have proposed building heights and bylaws that would fit in with the equipment that they own at this present time. And we're open to discussion to sort out any firefighting issues that they may have. The applicant, not shown in our application, but the applicant owns additional land that fronts on Watkins Road. So any concerns about a secondary access into this project, now it's a one-way access off Low Heat Highway, we can address this in the future with a future NCP that is done, and that can be worked out. At least there's some control over what happens on that land, and there is a way to get in there with a secondary access. We obviously, throughout this whole process, the man that I work for, Gary Bailey, Webb Holdings, I have to report to him on the economic viability of this project. So we only have X number of lots and other products to sell here, and we have to try and figure out what's going on in the market, and we have to look at the costing. So we're looking at this constant. We have our own economic view of this project. This is why we're here today, because we feel we have a pretty significant package already. I don't know that we can handle more if we keep going. And with no certainty on land use or density, funding additional studies becomes pretty complicated. And this gentleman has funded us for quite a while. And I think we have a good project for the community. We'd really like to move forward with it. So in summary, the corporate report that is prepared by FERD planning staff is recommending that the project fund additional studies with no indication of support for land use or density. There is no schedule for completion of these studies. The studies, although important, can be completed as a condition of final approval. Community benefits that our project are providing are considerable and a significant game changer for the Scouts First Nation and the FVRD electoral area. We ask that FVRD allow the project to proceed to approvals while we answer questions and work with staff on all the various issues that need to be sorted out for a project of this scale. Thank you very much. And if you have any further questions, I can stand for a minute.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Baker. Director Castle.
Thank you, Chair Dickey. I was raised that anything worth doing is worth doing right. And I know that the applicant wants to get this right. I don't think that it's wrong to ask for more information in order to make sure that we're doing the right thing. Again, we can argue about the population unless we go out and count every person ourselves. We roughly know how many people are in our community. And this development, as presented, is proposing upwards of 1,000 people into our communities. I do appreciate hearing the thoughts and comments of directors from other areas. As everybody knows, I represent Area G, which a lot of people in this area that we're talking about right now specifically actually think they live in Area G. So, this is an extremely important project for the people of Area G, and we need to get it right for those people. I have not come in with any preconceived notions whether or not I think that this should or shouldn't happen, but I need more information, and I will be fully supporting the staff recommendation and the motion that's on the table. In particular, what's important to me as it pertains to the residents of Area G, the highway. I ran on a platform that we need to address the safety issues on the Lougheed Highway all the way from Mission to the District of Kent. I will work relentlessly to ensure that at least during my 4 years, there is some improvement to the safety for people driving along that highway. I need to hear from the Minister of Transportation. I know that there are plans in place. We're about to move forward with work on the Lougheed Highway. I need to know and be sure and hear from Moti how this works into those plans. There was a comment that there's been discussions with the fire chiefs of North Fraser Fire Department. I want to hear from the chiefs. I want to see. I want to hear the chief tell me that he has no concerns with 1,000 extra people coming into Lake Erie. I want to know what the impact on existing community amenities are. The residents of Lake Erie, they're already losing their mind over the amount of people that come from outside of their community to use their facilities. To think that nobody from this new development is going to want to go down and enjoy the lake, that's not just based in reality. So I want to hear what the impact on those existing amenities is. Again, when I was at the information meeting at DeRoche Hall, Mission Public School Chair Shelley Carter was in the room. I believe that was November we had that meeting was held. At that time, Chair Carter knew nothing about this. In fact, I invited her to come out. So if there has been a discussion with the school district since then, I want to know that. I want to hear it firsthand. I'd like to hear what the developer plans to offer as far as community amenity contributions. The finances of this project and the impact that it will have on the regional district and resources and work plan concerns me greatly. We hear comments about not sure if we can do a report about fireworks because it might not be in the work plan. This is a whole lot of work that we're asking staff to get to undertake. I agree with affordable housing options. I'm not quite sure I'm really hoping the reference to trailers along the highway are recreational vehicles and not the mobile home parks that house many, many people in our community. But I also am not convinced that the housing that's going to come into this development is going to help people living in their RVs. Though there's a total disconnect there. When you read through the market that we're looking for, I don't think it's the people living in the trailers along the highway. So I'm really interested to hear when we talk about housing, affordable housing options, what exactly benefit to the people living in the area in terms of housing will there be? We've just embarked on a project to consider development cost charges. It's interesting to me that just as we're embarking on that discussion, we have the largest development that's ever come into the regional district, and we got to get started on it. Disconnect in our meetings, folks. Last meeting, we talked about the cost, the capacity, and how we need to address that. And now we're talking about moving forward anyway. The benefits, I agree. For me, the days of planning, developing without transit in mind, I'm totally not in support of car-centric developments. I know that the regional district has been working with BC Transit to try to bring transit services to the north side of the river. I'm really interested to hear from BC Transit whether or not this project actually supports that, because we need transit out in that area. I'm curious to know when our neighbors at the District of Kent come into this conversation. I'm here today speaking on behalf of the residents right next door in Area G, right next door in the District of Kent. I want to make sure that those voices and interests are also being taken into consideration. Also at the public information meeting in November, there were representatives from Lacamo First Nation there. At that time, again, those representatives from Lacamo, there seemed to be a disconnect there as well. I'm hearing that there have been conversations. There is a letter. I'd like to see that. I'd like to know what those conversations have been and where they stand on it. In one of the letters from the applicant, they talked about the OCP designation of limited land use, limited use. And it's quoted that it's intended to minimize development in remote, inaccessible, hazardous, or environmentally sensitive areas. I want us to think long and hard about all of that, and in particular, as it relates to our regional growth strategy. There's a lot of development and infill happening within the municipalities, and I don't really understand why we're rushing to bring this sort of development to a rural area, and why it's not appropriate for this sort of thing to be looked at within the municipalities. And I guess that goes to my last question, or my question is, why is the applicant being so aggressive in their plans? Why so many houses? Thank you.
Mr. Baker, did you want to make a reply to that?
Sure, I'll have a go at answering those questions. When we started out looking at this project, it had some preliminary discussions when this project was given a temporary use permit back in 2016. Winding it forward 6 years later, the end of the temporary use permit, the discussions and the reports at that time was to move forward with an application. At that time, in those days in 16, it was talked about being single family subdivision, 75 lots, 65 lots. I don't know. There's a few different versions of plans floating around. We started looking at that. We started looking at the housing needs study. We started looking at the affordability issue. And then we started looking at the fact that we needed to have a wastewater treatment plant here. And it doesn't make economic sense. And then building a bunch of sort of executive style lots for executive homes on the side of a hill with a nice view is not really doing anything to address affordability. And the economics of it is really not making sense. So that was the reason why we kind of pivoted on that and said, let's do something different. And your comment about the trailers on the side of the highway, yes, I know the difference between a trailer park. I actually lived in one as a young man with my family. And these are trailers. These are travel trailers that are parked on the side of the road and people are living in them. And obviously those people are not going to be the ones buying a townhouse or an apartment or a single family house, or at least probably not likely. I would love it if they could. But every house that comes into the marketplace, every townhouse, every apartment, every basement suite, all of this helps the market. No supply, I can tell you, is not going to help the market. That's what we're in right now. So supply, whether it's in this community, another community, we have talked to Kent, Patrick, who's here today, Patrick Giesbrecht, he's our community advisor. He has talked to the mayor of Kent. He's talked to the mayor of Harrison Hot Springs. We've talked to the mayor of Mission. We've talked to the mayor of Abbotsford, mayor of Chilliwack. There is housing needs everywhere. All of them understand housing needs. Any supply is good. And this community, although it's remote, it's not that remote. It only takes a couple, like 10, 15 minutes to pop down the road to Agassiz, back to Mission, back to DeRoche, to the little stores and things there. And somehow people all over Canada live like this. So I don't really see an issue with the project. This is bringing supply to an area. This is a gravel pit. And it's going to be changed. The proposal is to change it to housing, to stop the gravel extraction, to stop the noise, to stop the dust, to bring to an end industrial process in a community that doesn't like it. And we're trying to fulfill that. I can't remember the other questions that you had, but I tried to answer what I could remember. I didn't have a pen to jot them down.
Yes, thank you. And in fact, I only asked one question. Are we good? I only asked one question. What I was doing is highlighting my concerns for both yourself and staff to hear so that you understand where my head is at. And now I think I've lost my train of thought. Oh, no. So you've just said that the economics don't make sense at 50 or 60 lots. So what I'm hearing is that if this is the proposal that we have, the scope of this development, this is the economics that you're looking for, a 60 lot subdivision, it's not worth it for you?
This project that is, as it exists right now, the proposal before you makes economic sense when we look at the package, the benefits package, the wastewater treatment plant, the new reservoir, the water system, the well, everything. It makes economic sense right now.
Okay, good. Thank you, Director Castle. I see Director Davidson has his hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just trying to stay in the lane here, and I have a question for Mr. Baker. I'm sure I'm going to have comments later, but just to get the Q&A through first. You mentioned having these additional studies as a condition of approval. I'm struggling with that concept, thinking that, okay, well, what if the additional studies provide information that indicates that approval shouldn't have happened? So I'm wondering if you can elaborate on that desire to defer these additional studies to final approval, and how do you see that mitigating the risk that these studies are intended to mitigate in the first place? I'm struggling with that one. Thank you.
Some of the studies and additional information requested by FERD staff There are things that we can look into concurrent with approvals. Some of the questions, I don't think we're going to find an answer to them, even if we study them. There's discussion about the capacity of the FERD staff to take these things on. I'm sure we can work out an arrangement, but to continue on, the nub of the issue is to continue on with no idea what we're going to end up with at the end of this process. And I know it's not ideal, but we're in a situation where we have an owner. He's committed to shutting down a gravel pit. He's committed to moving forward with an application. He's asked us to move it forward. We've looked at the options. We felt this was the best option. We've come to an agreement with the FERD and we've moved forward with the process, and we're now trying to fulfill that process and move on with some certainty. Some of those questions we'll be able to get answers for, and I don't anticipate any of them are going to change what it is that we're trying to do here. It may change.
I guess my point is that the output of these studies might be counterindicative to going ahead with the development at all. But you won't go ahead with the studies unless you've got approval of the development, and it just seems like a circular argument, which is negating the value of the studies if they have no impact on the development. So that's my inherent struggle. But anyway, that's my only question. I'll if somebody else has questions they want
Thank
to
you,
do.
Director Davidson. I think directors were starting to get into the realm of what is normally a staff analysis of a project, and maybe best that the professional people get involved at this stage. I certainly know a lot more about what's being proposed in this project than I did an hour ago. So I think it's all been very worthwhile, but I think maybe we should draw this discussion to a close and thank the proponents for their presentation today. Just myself, I've seen in our electoral area a fairly major development, and we invested a lot of time and analysis prior to going to the public with it. And I thought it was a good investment of that time, because by the time we did go to the public, we had a saleable product. And I think what's being discussed here is perhaps pushing the timeline a lot harder than we have in the past. So that's my experience in the past. Perhaps I'm wrong, but that's what I've seen. I do not see any other directors. Director Davidson, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So if we're coming to sort of final comments before a vote, my understanding is that echo again, bear with me here. My understanding is that Director Wardenberg does indeed support the staff, the motion before us right now. And on that basis alone, I'll support it as well, assuming I have that correct. To Directors Johnson and McMahonic, one, I understand your concerns, that they're certainly valid. But one thing that I always try to bear in mind is that, your community, people in your community didn't elect me, they elected you. The same applies to Director Wardenberg. And there's an inherent danger in trying to project for any electoral area director and trying to project their concerns into another electoral area director's community. So it's to be avoided if at all possible, in my opinion. The other thing I wanted to say is that one of my early takeaways from this role was that when you do your decision making, try to keep that 3-generation time frame in mind, meaning that you're making a decision that's going to have an impact generations ahead of us, and these decisions need to be done well, and they need to be done correctly. And staff has flagged gaps in the necessary inputs into that decision making, and a process for closing those gaps. And so with that in mind, assuming Director Wardenberg is in support of the motion before us, I'll be supporting it as well. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Davidson. Director McAhonig.
Thank you, Director Davidson, for your comments. I know that we are here voted in for our director areas, but we're here to work as the board for the regional district. And I think that we have to vote in that way and do our due diligence and speak and do our proper homework, which I believe that I have and I feel comfortable. And I think I have to follow what I think is ethically right in all situations. So thank you for your opinion.
Good. Thank you, Director McAhonig. Director Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation today and the information. For me, I can certainly see that and do realize that there's a need for housing and housing of all sorts. I am not feeling confident that I'm the person that can decide whether or not the staff has what they need to move forward with the development of this size. I know they've done their work, and I obviously have seen that you've done your homework as well. But I will be supporting the motion on the table today just because the staff are saying that they need some time, or there needs to be a little bit more information and to do it right. And I think that that is important in considering that. I understand that the First Nations are in support of this and that it will benefit them. And I get that. And I realize how important that is. I also just think that it is a large project, and we do need to make sure that this is something that we can manage, but that also is done well. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Dixon. Okay, Director Davidson's hand is up, I see. Evidently, it is not up. So on the question, we have a motion before us as moved by Director Wardenberg. All those in favor? Contrary? Director McAhonig, contrary. Otherwise, pardon me. Oh, and Director Johnson, excuse me, contrary. Motion passes. Thank you, proponents, for your presentations, and thank you, directors. And we will move forward. Ms. Kinnaman.
10.1.1 is the 2023 Forest Enhancement Society of BC grant for wildfire fuel management prescriptions. There is a motion for your consideration.
Motion, move Director Castle, second Director Adamo. Any discussion? Director Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just kind of wondering if I'd have a little more information on how these projects, the priority fuel management prescriptions were chosen.
Sure. I think I'll turn things over to Stacy Barker, our Director of Regional Services, and she can explain that process.
Thank you for the question. So these 5 sites were identified as priority sites in the community wildfire protection plans that had been completed previously for the FPRD. There are other sites that are currently having prescription planning done as well by the province that are in addition to these sites. Those include, my understanding anyway, is that those include Post Creek, Hemlock, Boothroyd area, as well as around the community of Yale. So there are other prescription sites planning going on. And it is our hope as well to do more of these sites in the future moving forward. Okay, thank you.
Good, thank you, Director Dixon. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
10.1.2 is the Columbia Valley Fire Department land lease agreement. There's a motion for your consideration.
Director Dixon, second Director Wardenberg. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
10.2.1 is an information report about the Evacuee Support Services Program Guide. Staff would be happy to answer any questions.
Is Information Director Castle.
Thank you, Chair Dickey. Through you to staff. I'm just wondering if staff might be looking for us to perhaps write a similar letter, or would that be a benefit? Because I would be willing to put a motion on the floor that we write a letter if that's in fact what staff are hoping for.
Through the chair to Director Castle, staff are always happy to support that. I don't think that we've necessarily put this on the agenda with the hopes that that was what was going to occur. However, we would be happy to craft such a letter under this committee or the full board signature if that is the desire.
Good. Thank you, Director Castle.
I think that it would be of benefit for us to echo our colleagues in the other regional districts. So I would move a motion that that staff prepare a letter from the Fraser Valley Regional District that kind of echoes the points in the other regional districts.
Sure.
Which has escaped me.
That's okay. We'll fix that up.
That's a
for you.
motion. Right?
It's a really
Seconder.
bad motion.
Do we have a seconder? Director Dixon seconds discussion. So I took a look at this letter. It seems like a very lengthy, comprehensive list of concerns as to how this would apply. Is there a disconnect between where these ESS programs are in place in urban areas compared to our rural areas? Is there someone on staff that could speak to that?
Sure. Perhaps we turn things over to Graham Danilus and he can provide an overview.
Thank you, Chair. There sure is. There is a disconnect between how ESS is provided in practice in rural areas versus urban areas. But the situation really is quite different because ESS in urban areas, and I think in the provincial mindset, really focuses on things like hotel rooms, and many of our communities don't have hotel rooms. So we do look to our municipal partners for hotel capacity, but sometimes ESS in rural areas looks like Camp Hope, looks like establishing a reception center and maybe a lodging center at a place like Camp Hope. And frankly, that doesn't fit the provincial conception, and getting costs recovered under those circumstances is a challenge. But one of the issues that we wanted to highlight in bringing forward this report is that at times the province is making changes to their ESS programs that we all work with. And those changes come out in the form of guides, for example, and there isn't any consultation or any meaningful consultation behind those changes in the guides. So that's really the piece that we want to highlight, is that we deliver these services, and changes in the way the programs are delivered on the provincial end have a big effect on us, and we need to be engaged and have a voice in it. That's the critical.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Danilus. So do you feel that the concerns that Bulkley and Chaco Regional District are presenting, that they're taking a leadership role in this and they're adequately voicing those concerns, or do you think that we should be taking a bigger role in this?
It's a great thing that one of our fellow regional districts is leading the charge, and desirable thing, I think, to support them. It will assist with the preparation of a letter if that's your direction, and we would customize it to reflect several of Buckley and Chaco's, but maybe some of our own. A few of the concerns Buckley highlighted really has to do with their program structure, less relevant to us, but the overall thrust of their letter is relevant to us, and we would gladly reinforce that.
Good, thank you. Seems we have a plan. So on the motion, all those in favor? Contrary, motion carries.
Thank you. Moving down to item 12, reports by staff. I just wanted to take a moment and acknowledge our newest staff member, or at least newest in the room today, Sam Siddall, who is our new bylaw and enforcement officer. This is actually the first time I've actually had a chance to see Sam, so welcome. And we're really looking forward to having you join Team FBRD.
Great, welcome, Sam. Where are you coming from? Oh, wonderful. Great. Well, nice to have you on board. And we'll turn to Ms. Kinnaman.
So item 13 is reports by electoral area directors.
Director Castle.
Are you going to start with me every time?
Hey, you just do such a great job of breaking the ice.
Well, just so everyone knows, I was very quiet during the regional board meeting. so I'm going to make up for it now. Thank you. I attended a public hearing chaired by Director Wardenberg regarding a proposal for an indoor film studio at the end of Bayview Road in Lake Erock. There was a lot of emotion among the 50 or so residents that attended the public hearing. Most of the residents in attendance made comments about the application, and I'd like to acknowledge the challenges that Director Wardenberg endured in his efforts to keep the hearing moving and to bring decorum to the proceedings. I would like to see EASC have a discussion around public hearings and how we can all work together to support each other when we find ourselves chairing hearings in our own areas, as well as our FVRD staff, especially when it may be evident that items being commented on during public hearings are contentious or controversial. I think we can do better than what I observed in Area C, and I look forward to having a conversation at this table soon regarding public hearing processes within the electoral areas. There was a meeting of the Nakoman Island Dike Steering Committee, which included myself and FVRD engineering staff, the Nakoman Island Improvement District, Lacamo First Nation, and Urban Systems. We discussed erosion of the foreshore of the Fraser River at Athey Road and agreed that this work is outside of the scope of the committee and that we will be seeking the province to provide the funding and other resources to address. It was recommended that both the FVRD and LFN engage in a coordinated effort to advocate to the province for this work. We also worked on a strategy to finally move forward with the Nakoman Island pump station upgrades. I am optimistic that we have a solution and look forward to seeing the progress move forward in the near future. Dike upgrades were also discussed, and Lacamo provided an update of their work within the Nakoman Island Improvement District. Meetings of the Hatzic Watershed Recovery Table continue, and we are optimistic that there will be progress to report on this complex project soon. Just want to say that I appreciate Director Davidson's efforts around that table as he and I work together to bring long-term solutions to a decades-old challenges in that watershed. Director Davidson and I also participated in a discussion with Minister of Environment regarding the ongoing work to address sediment in the streams flowing into Hatzic Lake. Again, I'd like to acknowledge Director Davidson's strong voice on behalf of residents affected by flooding as a result of the sediment issues in the area. And I also appreciate Graham Danilus's expertise and professionalism during the discussion. On a lighter note, Area G has become Hollywood Fraser Valley North with the filming of a movie titled Under the Bridge, which is unfortunately about the story of Rena Verk. And it's being filmed around the Dudney Bridge and in other locations in the community. There has been a lot of activity on Nakoman Island and on Lacamo territory as the film crew seems to have really moved in. My drive home from Mission last night, I came around the corner in Dudney and thought I was lost actually, because they've totally transformed downtown Dudney. And finally, the Sasquatch Lions fundraising dance on February 11th at Deroche Hall was well attended, and I managed to get through my dance card, though former director Stobart's dance card was much fuller than mine. And when I left the dance, he was still cutting a rug and showing us all his best moves. The next Texas Hold'em tournament, also a fundraiser hosted by the Sasquatch Lions to support community projects, happens March 25th in Deroche. And for those itching to get out into their gardens and begin planting, Seedy Saturday is happening in the parking lot of the FVRD Access Building in Deroche on Saturday, May 18th. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Castle, for your abbreviated report. Director Makahonic.
Thank you. So I'm really happy about the announcement on our shared funding that we'll be receiving from the province for issues on Crown land. So that was a little more than I anticipated, so I'm quite happy about that. Had a couple of productive meetings with MLA Patton on other issues in the CRV. I've met with the Chilliwack River Cleanup Society, President and Vice President. They're looking at funding for 2024. Just kind of letting me know how they've worked with the regional district and the city and developing that working relationship. Mark your calendars. The next river cleanup is April 26th. You can register between 8:30 and 9:30 at Thompson Park. All are welcome. I've had 2 meetings with our fire chief, Mike Daniluk. Fire Smart Day will be May 27th at 11 a.m. at Thompson Park. All are welcome. A little bit of an issue that's come up, and thank you to Stacy Barker, Miss Barker, staff and Jennifer, Miss Kinnaman for some help on this. So the Bailey landfill has a new organic ban that came into effect November 22. Applies to all residential and commercial haulers, regardless of where they come from. Well, our hauler in the Chilliwack River Valley has been for decades white disposal. They're not equipped and they won't be equipped. So a couple weeks before this, I sent out I left a message and asked them if they're planning to up our fees or what was the plan. They sent out a message. They went out to Area H as well. That they are no longer will be providing service. And I've got a lot of, there's 2 different ways to look at it, and I talked to Director Dixon about it. And for us in the Chilliwack River Valley, like I'm just concerned if I don't get in front of this, it will become a big problem where we'll have, and we've had it before years ago when we had the bins, resident dump their garbage. So haulers aren't really keen on coming out and picking up garbage individually in the Chilliwack River Valley. Just about everybody's turned us down. I've had all sorts of residents, a few more today, reach out. I'm hoping to have possibly, I think you said GF or whatever is going to bring some information out to our meeting, but I really want to get the process started to see. I know there is some fair bit of interest for have it become a service in the area. So I don't know how much interest, but I think there's probably going to be some people that aren't happy and some people that are really happy. So, but I think we need to get the process started. I think we absolutely do. We're going to have a garbage problem. So anyway, and then we have a staff member. I didn't get the full name written down. That is coming out to our March 15th Ratepayers Association, and she will be providing information on composting and that, which I think will be well received as well. So that's March 15th at 7 to 8:30. I met with Baker Trails on some of their issues and actually referred them on to our MLA because I think it's something that might be more helpful for them with that. I continue to meet with the Chilliwack River Valley Rural Homelessness Stakeholders Group, and we're getting some traction there. Some good things are happening. So although we have some funding now that we'll be able to deal with some of the issues on Crown land, the Ministry of Forests is actually stepping up and they're going to be doing a lot more too. So that pot of money will last longer too. So it's not going to be all on that. So, and looking forward to that. I attended just out of the area, but it's on homelessness and some of the different things. The BIA safety meeting. I attended the Chamber of Commerce AGM. And I really wanted to thank the Fraser Valley Regional District staff and community for coming out to support Ann Davis Coldest Night of the Year event. We raised over $57,000 to help those most vulnerable in our community. So just really, really touched my heart and really makes a big difference. So we really help a lot of people. We stretch those dollars to make the most difference. So with that, you know, I just really want to, you know, I know this is our first contentious issue, but I really want to work with and a part of, and I think I will always try and support regional directors in things, in everything that I can. But I really understand that this is a governance board and it's a region. So, I mean, sometimes there's going to be that conflicting priority, and I just want to let people know here, my fellow directors, that I'm absolutely going to do the best I can. And am I going to get it right every time? No, but I'm going to do the best I can to be ethical and do my due diligence and homework on everything that I bring to this table. So thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director McConnell, for a very nice report, except that you make me feel very lazy, but Director Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lakeside Trail has started some more work and looks like it's another 6 weeks. So they'll be finishing the section from more or less the Sunnyside campground all the way to Jade Bay to in BC Parks there. And it's pretty exciting. It's getting lots of positive feedback on that. And it's nice to see that work happening. And that's a lot of that is with the grant. Well, it's with the grant funding that we received. So that's a 6-week lane closure. That's a little bit of the downside because our road has had lane closures for years. And there's another one down at the Cultus Lake Hall where they're repairing the damage that was done from the atmospheric river. And this time there is a huge job. They're repairing it properly and with much larger culverts and all those things. And so it takes time, but in the end, it will be a nice improvement. Had a meeting the other day with Mr. Daniluz and Neil Bolton from Modia, as well as a couple of people from Leisure Valley, and just looking at they too experienced a lot of damage during the atmospheric river, and just ways to support what kind of support they might need or what the repairs will be looking at there. So down the road, and I think it'll be July, probably that road will also be getting an upgraded culvert and some repairs happening. But the intention there is to do as much as we can to prevent future damage. So that is good news. With the garbage incident, I only found out about it on Facebook, where people posted the letter, and we're having some concerns. A little bit different in my areas that GFL does come up there, and so people seem to be switching over to them. So we'll see what happens with that. Attended a class meeting and had a great presentation by invasive species with Kathy Ma. I just talked a little bit about all the invasive species, and I got to say it's kind of a long list. And managing it at Cultus Lake area, there's smallmouth bass, there's milfoil, yellow flag, iris, and now I learned this morning those stink bugs apparently are also there. So it's just ongoing, but really good information, and that helps support the environment committee that Cultus Lake, but also with the class. And oh yeah, I might as well tell you about my goose permit. And our Cultus Lake Goose Management Committee is up and had our first meeting. I think I told you that a permit has been applied for twice because they have a new form. So we had to transfer all the information onto the new form. And our first goose count for the spring count is the end of March. So see what happens with that. That's it for me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Director Dixon. Another busy place. Director Wardenberg.
Yes, thank you, Chair. CD Saturday, Corey. I guess I'll see you at CD Saturday on Saturday. I besides dealing with certain developments, I've had the unique opportunity to attend a repatriation ceremony at the Stahelis First Nation, actually at their Lithawat-Lalum, which is a healing house there. They repatriated 29 baskets from the Kilby Historic Site. I had the honor to be a witness there. So yeah, that was quite the experience for sure. I'm glad to see the chief and council and everyone there. Was also opportunity. I didn't know it at the time, but Cheryl and Crispin, I think is her last name. She is a long-term staff member there of her HR. I think everybody, well, some of you would know her for sure. She's usually the chief's right-hand lady. And no matter who's chief, she's the chief's right-hand lady. Anyway, that was her retirement party. Yeah, so I was honored to be there as well. To be part of that was a big deal. I had a Zoom call this morning with the Bears on Hospitality Group up in Hemlock, just making sure everybody's still good up there. And they are. And I look forward to going up there on March 25th, Saturday between 2 and 4. We're gonna have a meet and greet with the Hemlock Valley Homeowners Association and maybe a pint. And I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Director Wardenberg. Director Castle or Director Adamo, excuse me.
Seemed a little insignificant here. First of all, Director Dixon, did you say a goose count? Okay, just wanted clarification on that. We don't have any of those up our way, so. Okay, and so I didn't do a whole lot last couple of weeks, really, mostly on the phone and meeting with a few people, but nothing official. That's mostly coming up. However, I did attend the Arts Council Food for Change with the proceeds going to the community food resource, along with Mayor Smith and CEO of Hope, Mr. Fordolowski, and our wives. We had a great time there and helped them raise a great deal of money that evening for something that they've been doing for the community of Hope and surrounding area for the homeless through one of the church programs. So it was great to be a part of something like that and to see a bunch of people live and listen to some live music for a change. It was also hosted by Staff Sergeant Farland, who as an MC did a fantastic job, and we encourage him to keep that up. I think that'll be a lot of fun in the future for upcoming events. Really, that's it. I have a great meeting next week with our MLA, MLA Taggart, and we'll be meeting with her to discuss a number of things and have been given some one-on-one time. So I'll have an update for everyone when we meet next. And for you, Director Castle, planting seeds is something that we won't be doing in the Sunshine Valley until June. So I prefer not to hear about seed sales, plant sales, or people cutting their lawn. Thank you very much. That's it for now.
And it's an outdoor event in beautiful downtown DeRoche.
Thank you, Director Castle. Director Johnson. Director Adamo, jeez.
Thank you, Chair. So Sunshine Valley is not necessarily true to its name.
Oh, it is.
Oh, yeah. Just not enough to plant seeds. On February 25th, I attended two meetings, actually, one for the Landfill Society and also the Land Society. I know it sounds confusing because it is, but it is two separate societies. Both of these went well. I did pass on along some questions that arose from the landfill meeting to staff for feedback and answers, which I received. Thank you. And I have passed it on to the people that had posed the questions. March 7th and 8th, the Boothroyd Band hosted a gathering called Mending Spirits, which I attended. They had 4 guest speakers, one of whom was residential school survivor Dennis Saddleman, also known as the Word Warrior. He's a poet and an author. He's written 1 book and has started on his 2nd book. You might have seen him on TV October the 3rd, 2022, when he attended a National Day of Truth and Reconciliation in Ottawa and read his poem Monster about residential school experience. And one of the other speakers was also a residential school survivor. Anyway, needless to say, it was a pretty heavy day and a lot of emotions, but it was well attended and well received. In reading the news from the province, I see that I was happy to see that Director Makahonic got the funding that she requested. So I'd just like to say thank you and well done. And this Tuesday and every second Tuesday, we have 9 musicians, give or take, depends. Sometimes the pharmacist from Hope is working and doesn't get up, but a couple of fellows from Hope and mostly our locals get together in the North Bend Hall and play music from noon until usually about 5 o'clock. They take a break around 2. There's coffee and goodies that are served. So there's a combination of guitars, mandolin, drums, banjo, and it's quite entertaining. And the eldest of the musicians happens to be 94 and has the voice of a 25-year-old, happens to be my dad. Thank you.
Well, that is interesting. Thank you, Director Johnson. Director Davidson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like Director McCahonick, I'm happy to hear about the provincial province kicking in funds towards cleanup, Crownland cleanup tipping fees. I'm also hopeful that some of the money will make its way over to Area F. The Mission Environmental Stewardship Society goes out on a regular basis and cleans up Forest Service road areas. And also thank you to Director Castle for his kind words and his patience and forbearance as I go on my various rants around Hatzic recovery and the Hatzic task force. Discussions are getting interesting and that they're getting honest and productive. I'm looking forward to more of the same. Thank you.
Director Davidson, and I have nothing to report from quiet little Popcom. I did want to ask staff if we could get a contact list of all the electoral area directors with phone numbers and perhaps a staff list too would be helpful for the directors. And that, I think that would cover off the reports and I will look to Ms. Kinnaman.
Great. So item 14 is public question period for items relevant to the agenda. I see that we no longer have any members of the public joining us in the boardroom at this time, but I would just turn things over to our corporate officer, Jamie Van Ness, as to whether we have members of the public online.
Thank you. We do have one member of the public that's joining us online through Zoom. This would be your opportunity to ask a question relevant to the agenda. You could just hit the raised hand function if you do have a question. And I'll just take a moment to advise that we have not received any written questions. And it would appear there's no questions, so we can move on to the next item.
Good, which would be
Resolution to close the meeting.
Motion, Director Johnson, second Director Dixon. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, contrary, motion carries. Are we going to take a couple minutes?
Yeah, give us a couple minutes.
Yeah.
That would be great and give you a chance to stretch your legs.